In the heart of Columbus, Ohio, where winter winds whispered through empty alleyways, 19-year-old Maya Rodriguez huddled beneath 3 layers of blankets in her makeshift shelter. The cardboard walls of her temporary home, tucked behind the public library, had become her sanctuary for the past 8 months. But on this particular morning, something felt different in the air. The sun hadn't yet risen when Maya carefully folded her blankets, tucking them into her weathered backpack, the same one she'd carried since her last day of high school. Every morning, she would arrive at the library before anyone else, waiting patiently for the doors to open. The library had become more than just a warm place to spend her days. It was her classroom, her office, and her last connection to the dreams she refused to let go of. Maya's fingers were still stiff from the cold as she pulled out her worn notebook, its pages filled with college application essays she'd written and rewritten countless times. She had graduated as valedictorian of her class, but life had taken an unexpected turn when her mother fell ill, and the medical bills consumed their modest savings. Now, with her mother gone and no family to turn to, Maya found herself fighting to keep her academic dreams alive while struggling to survive on the streets. The familiar face of Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, appeared at the door precisely at 8 a.m. She had never asked Maya why she was always first in line, but her gentle smile and quiet understanding had become a daily comfort. "Good morning, Maya," she said softly, holding the door open. "There's fresh coffee in the reading room today." Maya's daily routine was a testament to her determination. She would spend hours in the library's computer lab, applying for scholarships, taking free online courses, and searching for any opportunity to continue her education. Between research sessions, she would help reshelve books or assist younger students with their homework, small acts of giving back to the place that had become her haven. But today wasn't like other days. As Maya settled into her usual spot, near the reference section, she noticed an envelope that had slipped partially under the desk. Her name was written on it in elegant handwriting. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. Who would leave her a letter? How did they even know this was her spot? With trembling hands, Maya picked up the envelope. It was made of thick, cream-colored paper, the kind used for important correspondence. As she carefully opened it, her heart began to race. The letter inside was written on official letterhead, but it was the personal note at the top that caught her attention first. "Dear Maya," the letter began in warm, handwritten text. "Mrs. Henderson shared your story with me during my recent visit to the library. She told me about the brilliant young woman who spends her days helping others while quietly carrying her own burdens. Your dedication to education, despite facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles, moved me deeply." Maya's eyes welled with tears as she recognized the signature at the bottom, Usha, Vance. She had read about Mrs. Vance in the local newspapers, known for her advocacy for education and youth empowerment. But why would someone like her take notice of a homeless girl? The letter continued, and each word seemed to pierce through the walls Maya had built around her heart. "Your valedictorian speech, which Mrs. Henderson showed me, speaks of hope as a quiet force that persists even in our darkest moments. Your words reminded me of my own journey and the people who believed in me when I needed it most. Today, I want to be that person for you." Maya's hands shook as she read further. Mrs. Vance had not only written to her, she had taken action. The letter detailed a full scholarship opportunity at Ohio State University, including housing and a stipend for living expenses. It wasn't just money. It was a chance at the future Maya had thought was slipping away. But it was the personal touches in the letter that broke through Maya's carefully maintained composure. Mrs. Vance wrote about her own experiences as an immigrant, about the power of education to transform lives, and about seeing in Maya the same fire that had driven her own success. She spoke not with pity, but with genuine recognition of Maya's strength and potential. "Your circumstances do not define you," the letter continued. "They have revealed your resilience, your determination, and your unwavering spirit. These are the qualities that will carry you forward, and these are the reasons I believe in your future." Maya had to pause reading several times, overwhelmed by emotions she had kept locked away for months. In her world of careful survival, where every day was about making it to the next, someone had seen beyond her circumstances to who she really was. Someone had recognized the dreams she refused to abandon. Mrs. Henderson appeared quietly beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I hope you don't mind that I shared your story," she said softly. "Mrs. Vance visited last month for a literacy program, and when she asked about the young woman who helped tutor the children after school, I couldn't help but tell her about you." Maya looked up at the librarian, who had been her silent guardian these past months, seeing for the first time the depth of care in the older woman's eyes. "I didn't know. I never thought." Maya's voice cracked with emotion. "You've touched more lives than you realize," Mrs. Henderson said, sitting down beside her. "The children you help with their homework. They ask for you by name, the elderly gentleman you assist with the computer. He tells everyone about the kind young lady who never makes him feel foolish for not understanding technology. You've created ripples of good in this community, even while carrying such a heavy burden." The letter in Maya's hands represented more than just a scholarship. It was validation of her worth, recognition of her struggle, and a bridge to the future she had feared was lost forever. Mrs. Vance had written not just as a benefactor, but as someone who saw Maya's potential and refused to let it be wasted. As the morning light streamed through the library windows, casting warm patterns on the letter that would change her life, Maya allowed herself to feel something she had carefully guarded against these past months. Hope, not the cautious hope of daily survival, but the expansive hope of possibilities and dreams renewed. In the quiet of the library, surrounded by the books that had been her refuge, Maya began to write a response to Mrs. Vance. Her words flowed freely, carrying the weight of gratitude and the lightness of renewed purpose. She wrote about her dreams of becoming a teacher herself someday, of being able to reach out to other young people facing seemingly impossible odds. And as she wrote, Maya realized that this moment, this unexpected act of kindness from a stranger who chose to see her, would become the story she would one day tell her own students. A story about how hope can arrive in an envelope, how compassion can bridge the gap between struggle and opportunity, and how sometimes the most powerful acts of kindness come from those who recognize our worth when we need it most. The library began to fill with its usual morning visitors, but Maya remained absorbed in her response, pouring her heart onto paper. She wrote about the months of uncertainty, about maintaining her dignity while living on the streets, about never giving up on her education even when it seemed impossible. But mostly, she wrote about the future, a future that suddenly seemed within reach thanks to one person who chose to notice, to care, and to act. Mrs. Henderson quietly placed a cup of coffee beside Maya, her presence a reminder of all the small kindnesses that had helped her survive these difficult months. The warm aroma mingled with the familiar scent of books, creating a moment Maya knew she would remember forever. The moment when her life began to change, not through grand gestures, but through the power of one letter and the compassion of those who saw her true worth. The following days passed in a blur of emotions and preparations. Maya found herself sitting in a small coffee shop across from the library, clutching the acceptance letter from Ohio State University that had arrived with unprecedented speed. Mrs. Vance's influence had expedited the process, turning what usually It took months into mere days. The steam from her coffee, a rare luxury she allowed herself to celebrate, rose in delicate spirals as she read the letter for the 100th time. She thought back to the morning when everything changed, just 3 days ago. After writing her response to Mrs. Vance, Maya had barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities she'd forced herself not to consider for so long. The next day, she'd received a call from Mrs. Vance's assistant, arranging a meeting that would take place this very afternoon. The coffee shop's bell chimed, and Maya looked up to see Mrs. Henderson entering, her familiar warm smile providing comfort amid the whirlwind of changes. The librarian had become more than just a silent guardian. She was now an active participant in Maya's transformation. "I brought something for you," Mrs. Henderson said, sliding into the seat across from Maya. She pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I've been saving this for the right moment." Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages crisp and empty, waiting to be filled. "For your new chapter," she explained simply. Maya ran her fingers over the smooth cover, fighting back tears. "I never told you why I really came to the library that first day," she said quietly. "It wasn't just for warmth or the computers. I came because—" She paused, gathering courage. "Because my mom used to bring me here every Saturday when I was little. Before she got sick, she'd sit in that big armchair by the window and read to me for hours." Mrs. Henderson reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "I remember," she said softly. "Your mother always checked out medical textbooks along with your picture books. She was studying to become a nurse, wasn't she?" Maya nodded, surprised. "She never got to finish. The cancer came back, and this time—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. "But she always said that knowledge was the one thing nobody could take away from you. Even when we lost our apartment, even when everything else was gone, I still had everything I'd learned." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another woman, her presence commanding yet gentle. Usha Vance stood in the doorway, dressed elegantly but without ostentation, her eyes quickly finding Maya in the small cafe. Maya stood up so quickly she almost knocked over her coffee, but Mrs. Vance's warm smile put her at ease. "Maya, Mrs." Vance said, stepping forward to take both of Maya's hands in hers. "I'm so glad to finally meet you in person." Her voice carried the same warmth that had permeated her letter, with an accent that hinted at her own journey from India to America. As Mrs. Vance settled into their booth, ordering tea for herself, Maya noticed how she made no show of her position or influence. Instead, she asked Maya questions, real questions, about her dreams, her studies, her mother. She listened with genuine interest as Maya spoke about her goal to become a teacher, about the children she tutored at the library, about the online courses she'd been taking despite her circumstances. "Your mother was right about knowledge," Mrs. Vance said, after Maya shared her mother's words. "When I first came to this country, books were my constant companions. They were my escape, my education, and eventually, my bridge to understanding American culture. But it was the people, the ones who saw my potential and reached out, who truly changed my life." Mrs. Vance pulled out a folder, placing it carefully on the table. "I've brought something else besides the scholarship details," she said. "It's an opportunity I think you might be interested in." She explained that she ran a summer program for underprivileged children, focusing on education and mentorship. "We need someone who understands both the importance of education and the reality of overcoming obstacles. Someone who can inspire these children not just with words, but with their own story." Maya's heart raced as she realized what Mrs. Vance was suggesting. "You want me to teach," Mrs. Vance completed the sentence. "Initially, as an assistant this summer before your classes begin. The position includes a stipend and temporary housing starting immediately. I believe these children need to see someone like you, someone who never gave up on education, even when everything seemed impossible. The reality of what this meant hit Maya all at once. She wouldn't have to wait until the fall semester to have a roof over her head. She could start building her future immediately, doing what she loved most, teaching and helping others. Mrs. Henderson, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "The children you've been tutoring will miss you," she said, "but they'll be so proud to know where you've gone. Some of them have already asked if they can write to you when you go to college." Maya felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the tears of struggle she'd grown accustomed to. These were tears of overwhelming gratitude and hope. "I don't know how to thank you both," she said, looking between Mrs. Vance and Mrs. Henderson. "You've given me back my future." "You never lost your future, Maya," Mrs. Vance corrected gently. "You held on to it through every difficult day, every night in the cold, every moment you chose to help others, despite your own struggles. We're not giving you anything you haven't earned. We're simply opening a door. You're the one who built the path to it." As they discussed the details of the summer program and the upcoming semester, Maya found herself sharing more about her experiences on the streets. She talked about the small acts of kindness she'd witnessed, about the community of homeless people who looked out for each other, about the dignity she'd fought to maintain while living without a home. Mrs. Vance listened intently, occasionally, making notes. "These are stories that need to be heard," she said. "Would you be willing to share them with our students? Not just your success story, but the reality of homelessness, the humanity of those still struggling." Maya thought about the friends she'd made on the streets, the veteran who always shared his blankets, the elderly woman who knew all the safe places to sleep, the teenage runaway she'd convinced to return home. "Yes," she said firmly, "people need to understand that homelessness doesn't define a person, that behind every person on the street there's a story, dreams, and potential." Mrs. Vance smiled, a look of satisfaction in her eyes. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this position. You understand that education isn't just about books and grades. It's about seeing the potential in every person, about lifting others. As you rise..." As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows through the cafe windows, they finalized the details of Maya's immediate future. She would start the summer program in 2 weeks, move into temporary housing next week, and begin her college classes in the fall. Mrs. Vance's assistant had already arranged for Maya to get the necessary clothing and supplies for her new role. Before they parted, Mrs. Vance shared one last piece of wisdom. "Maya, in our culture, we have a saying, Vidya Dhanam Sarvadhanam Pradhanam. The wealth of education is the most supreme wealth. Your mother understood this, and she passed that understanding to you. Now you'll pass it on to others, Mrs." Henderson hugged Maya tightly before leaving, whispering, "Your mother would be so proud." Maya held on to those words as she watched both women leave the cafe, the leather journal clutched to her chest like a talisman. That evening, as the sun set over Columbus, Maya returned to her spot behind the library one last time. She carefully packed up her few possessions, leaving extra blankets for anyone else who might need them. In her new journal, she wrote her first entry. "Today, I learned that hope isn't just about dreaming of a better future. It's about recognizing the light in others and helping it shine. Mrs. Vance didn't just give me a scholarship. She showed me that my struggles have purpose, that every obstacle I've overcome has prepared me to help others overcome theirs. Tomorrow, I begin a new chapter, not just as a student, but as someone who can now reach back and help others find their way forward. Mom, I promise to make you proud. Your sacrifices weren't in vain. Education truly is the wealth that can never be taken away, and I'm going to spend my life sharing it with others." The morning sun filtered through real curtains for the first time in nearly a year. Maya stood in her temporary housing unit, a modest but clean studio apartment provided through Mrs. Vance's summer program. her few possessions barely filled. A corner of the room, but the space felt rich with possibility. On the small desk by the window, her new journal lay open, already containing plans for her first day as a teaching assistant. She thought about the children she would meet today, kids from backgrounds similar to her own, carrying dreams bigger than their circumstances. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down her new blouse, another gift from Mrs. Vance's foundation. The reflection in the mirror showed someone both familiar and strange, the same Maya, but now with a glimmer of confidence replacing the shadow of uncertainty in her eyes. The community center where the summer program was held stood just a few blocks from her old spot behind the library. Maya walked past her former shelter, noticing someone had already made use of the blankets she'd left. A small note was pinned to the cardboard. "Thank you, guardian angel." The sight brought tears to her eyes, reminding her that kindness always found its way forward. At the center's entrance, she was greeted by Lena, Mrs. Vance's assistant coordinator. "The kids are so excited to meet you," Lena said, leading Maya through the bustling hallways. "Mrs. Vance told them about you. Not everything, of course, but enough to spark their curiosity. You're already something of a legend." The classroom was filled with 20 students, ranging from ages 12 to 15. Maya recognized the look in their eyes, the same mixture of hope and hesitation she'd carried for so long. A girl in the front row clutched a worn math textbook, reminding Maya of herself at that age, when the library had become her sanctuary. Mrs. Vance stood at the front of the room, her presence both authoritative and nurturing. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice carrying the same warmth it had in the cafe. "Today we're joined by someone very special. Maya Rodriguez will be working with us this summer, and she has an extraordinary story to share." Maya stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "Hello," she said, looking at each young face in turn. "I want to start by asking you something. What do you think is the most valuable thing you own?" The answers came hesitantly at first. Phones, computers, favorite shoes. Maya nodded, acknowledging each response. Then she told them about her mother's words, about knowledge being the one possession that couldn't be taken away. She watched their expressions shift as she spoke about studying in the library, about helping others even when she had nothing. Herself. 8 months ago, she continued, choosing her words carefully, "I lost everything except what was in my mind and heart, but that was enough to keep going, to keep learning, to keep believing in a future where I could make a difference." A boy in the back row raised his hand. Were you homeless?" he asked quietly. Maya could see similar questions in other eyes, some reflecting understanding that came from personal experience. "Yes," Maya answered honestly. "And during that time, I learned something powerful. Our circumstances don't define our worth or our potential. Every one of you has something valuable to offer the world, something that no one can take away." She noticed the girl with the math book straightening in her seat, eyes bright with recognition. Maya walked over to her desk. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the book. Opening it, she found margins filled with careful notes, similar to how she used to study. "This," Maya held up the book, "isn't just about numbers. It's about problem solving, about breaking down big challenges into smaller pieces we can handle. That's what we're going to do together this summer. Tackle big dreams, one step at a time." Mrs. Vance watched from the side, a subtle smile playing on her lips as Maya connected with the students. During the next hour, Maya worked with small groups, helping with summer reading assignments and math problems. But more importantly, she listened to their stories, their struggles, their hopes. During the lunch break, a young girl named Destiny lingered behind. "Miss Rodriguez," she said hesitantly, "my mum, she's sick. We might lose our apartment. I've been trying to study, but it's hard when—" Her voice trailed off, but Maya understood completely. "Come with me," Maya said gently, leading Destiny to a quiet corner. She took out her journal and wrote down her old study schedule from the library. This is how I managed when things were hardest. The library opens at 8 a.m. If you get there early, Mrs. Henderson, tell her I sent you. She'll make sure you have a quiet place to work. Destiny's eyes widened. You know Mrs. Henderson? She was one of the people who helped me keep my dreams alive, Maya explained. Sometimes, Destiny, the hardest part isn't the studying. It's believing you deserve the chance to succeed. But you do deserve it, and I'm going to help you remember that every day you're here. After the students left, Mrs. Vance called Maya into her office. The walls were lined with photographs. Mrs. Vance with various community leaders at graduation ceremonies with groups of students from previous years. But what caught Maya's eye was a small, worn photo on her desk of a much younger Usha Vance standing in front of what appeared to be a modest apartment building. My first home in America, Mrs. Vance said, following Maya's gaze. Not much bigger than your current apartment. I came here with 2 suitcases and a scholarship, terrified but determined. Every time I look at this photo, I remember that feeling. The mixture of fear and possibility. She gestured for Maya to sit. I watched you today, she continued. You have a gift, Maya. You don't just teach, you understand. That's something that can't be learned from books. Maya thought about Destiny, about the other students she'd met today. They remind me of myself, she admitted. Every one of them is carrying something heavy, but they're still showing up, still trying. That's why I wanted you here, Mrs. Vance replied. These children need more than tutoring. They need someone who can show them that their dreams are possible, someone who understands their struggles because she's lived them. She pulled out a file from her desk. I've been thinking about extending the program beyond summer, a year-round mentorship initiative, focusing on students like Destiny who need extra support. Would you be interested in helping me develop it, alongside your studies? Maya felt her heart skip a beat. You mean continue teaching even after summer? Mrs. Vance nodded. Part-time, of course. Your education comes first, but I believe you could help shape this program into something truly meaningful. You understand both sides of the equation, the student who needs help and the teacher who can provide it. As they discussed the possibilities, Maya shared her observations from the day. The students who needed academic help, those who needed emotional support, the ones who were hiding their struggles behind brave faces. She talked about creating a safe space like the library had been for her, about incorporating practical life skills alongside academic subjects. You see, Mrs. Vance said warmly, this is exactly what I mean. You're not just teaching subjects. You're teaching survival, hope, dignity. These are lessons our students desperately need. Before Maya left that evening, Mrs. Vance handed her an envelope. Your first paycheck, she said. You've earned it. Maya held the envelope with trembling hands, remembering countless nights when she'd wondered how she would afford her next meal. Walking back to her apartment, Maya stopped at the library. Mrs. Henderson was at her usual desk, and her face lit up when she saw Maya. How was your first day? Maya told her about Destiny, about the mentorship program, about the incredible feeling of being able to help others while building her own future. I sent her to you, she admitted. I hope that's okay. Mrs. Henderson's eyes crinkled with warmth. Of course it is. That's how we create change, one person reaching back to help another forward. Soon Destiny will do the same for someone else. In her apartment that evening, Maya sat at her desk, opening her journal to write about her day. She described each student she'd met, their stories, their potential. She wrote about Mrs. Vance's mentorship proposal, about the way it felt to receive her first paycheck, about the responsibility and joy of being able to help others. But mostly, she wrote about the circle of kindness she was witnessing, how Mrs. Henderson's compassion had led to Mrs. Vance's intervention, which now allowed Maya to help students like Destiny, who would one day help others. It was a chain of hope, each link strengthened by understanding and empathy. Looking out her window at the city lights, Maya could see the library in the distance, its windows still glowing softly in the evening darkness. She thought about her mother, about all the Saturday mornings they'd spent there together, about how her mother's love for learning had planted the seeds for everything that was happening now. "The wealth of education is the most supreme wealth," she whispered, remembering Mrs. Vance's words. Today, she had begun sharing that wealth with others, and in doing so, she had discovered that she was richer than she'd ever imagined. Not in money, but in purpose, in understanding, in the ability to make a difference in young lives that mirrored her own journey. As she prepared for bed, in a real bed, with clean sheets and a soft pillow, Maya felt a deep sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories, new opportunities to help others find their path. But tonight, she could rest knowing that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. 3 months had passed since that first letter changed Maya's life. The summer program was drawing to a close, and the community center buzzed with excitement as students prepared for their final presentations. Maya stood in the back of the classroom, watching Destiny confidently explain her mathematics project to the assembled parents and community members. The girl who had once whispered about her fears of losing her home now stood tall, pointing to graphs and equations with assured hands. Thanks to Mrs. Vance's intervention and Maya's guidance, Destiny's family had received help with medical bills and housing assistance. But it was Destiny's own determination that had transformed her from a struggling student into one of the program's brightest stars. Mrs. Vance appeared beside Maya, both of them watching Destiny field questions from the audience with growing confidence. "She reminds me of someone," Mrs. Vance said softly, giving Maya a meaningful look, "someone who never let circumstances dim her light." Maya thought back to her own journey these past months. Her first semester at Ohio State would begin in just 2 weeks, but thanks to Mrs. Vance's year-round mentorship program, she would continue working with students like Destiny throughout the school year. The program had already expanded, with 3 new locations opening across Columbus. "Mrs. Vance," Maya said, turning to her mentor, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you. That first day, when Mrs. Henderson told you about me, why did you decide to help? There must be so many stories like mine." Mrs. Vance led Maya to a quiet corner of the room, away from the presentation buzz. "Do you remember the photo in my office? My first apartment in America?" When Maya nodded, she continued, "What I never told you was that I nearly gave up during my first year here. The culture shock, the loneliness, the pressure, it was overwhelming." She paused, watching another student begin their presentation. "One day, I was sitting in a public library much like you were, fighting back tears over a particularly difficult economics assignment. A librarian noticed me. She didn't just offer help with the assignment. She saw me, really saw me. She became my first friend in America, my anchor when things got tough." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion, understanding dawning, "like Mrs. Henderson was for me." "Exactly," Mrs. Vance smiled. "When she told me about you, about this brilliant young woman who helped others even while struggling with homelessness, I recognized something I've learned over the years. Sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones already helping others. Your story caught my attention, but it was your spirit that made me act." The conversation was interrupted by Destiny's mother, who approached them with tears in her eyes. "Miss Rodriguez, Mrs. Vance, I don't know how to thank you both. Destiny, she's like a different person now. Last night, she told me she wants to become a math teacher." Maya hugged the woman, remembering her own mother's dreams of becoming a nurse. "Destiny did all the hard work herself," she said. "We just helped." See what was possible. As the presentations continued, Maya noticed other transformations among her students. Jorge, who had been on the verge of dropping out, was now talking about college applications. Amara, who barely spoke when the program began, had developed a peer tutoring initiative for younger students. During the lunch break, Mrs. Henderson arrived, carrying a large scrapbook. "I thought today would be the perfect time to share this," she said, opening it to reveal newspaper clippings, photographs, and letters from the past 3 months. There was the local news story about Mrs. Vance's expanded mentorship program, photos of the summer sessions, and letters from parents describing how the program had changed their children's lives. But what brought tears to Maya's eyes was a collection of notes from her former library students, the ones she used to help before her own life changed. They wrote about missing her but being proud of her new role, about following her example of helping others while pursuing their dreams. "Your mother used to say that knowledge multiplies when shared," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "Look how far your sharing has reached." The afternoon session began with a surprise announcement from Mrs. Vance. "Today, we're not just celebrating our students' achievements," she said, gesturing for Maya to join her at the front. "We're also announcing the creation of the Rodriguez-Vance Scholarship Fund, which will provide educational support to homeless and at-risk youth in our community." Maya's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. Mrs. Vance continued, "Maya's story inspired this initiative, but it's her work over the past 3 months that showed us how to make it truly effective. The scholarship will include not just financial support, but mentorship, housing assistance, and opportunities to give back to the community." Looking out at the faces in the room, students, parents, teachers, community members, Maya saw the ripple effect of that one letter, that one act of kindness, expanding outward in ways she could never have imagined. When Mrs. Vance asked her to say a few words, Maya stepped forward, her heart full. 3 months ago, I was living behind a library, holding on to dreams that seemed impossible, she began. Today, I stand here not just as a future college student, but as someone who has witnessed the incredible power of belief. Belief in oneself, belief in others, belief in the transformative power of education. She looked at her students, her voice growing stronger. "But the most important lesson I've learned isn't about academic success. It's about the responsibility we have to lift others as we rise. Every one of you has shown me that when we share our knowledge, our experiences, our hope, it doesn't divide into smaller pieces. It multiplies." After the ceremony, as families and students mingled over refreshments, Maya found a quiet moment to write in her journal. She had filled nearly half its pages with stories of her students, their challenges, their triumphs, their dreams. Today's entry would be special. She wrote about the scholarship fund, about how her story had become part of something larger than herself. She wrote about Destiny's transformation, about Jorge's college plans, about Amara's peer tutoring program, but mostly she wrote about the circle of kindness that had brought her to this moment. From her mother's early lessons about the value of education, to Mrs. Henderson's quiet support, to Mrs. Vance's life-changing letter, and now to her own role in helping others find their path. A small commotion drew her attention. Destiny was showing her mother the acceptance letter to the advanced math program for the upcoming school year. The joy on their faces reminded Maya of the moment she had read Mrs. Vance's letter for the first time. As the day drew to a close, Maya walked with Mrs. Vance and Mrs. Henderson back to the library where everything had begun. The setting sun cast long shadows across the building's steps, where Maya had spent so many mornings waiting for the doors to open. "I used to think hope was about waiting for things to get better," Maya said, looking at the familiar entrance. "Now I understand. It's about making things better, not just for yourself, but for others." Mrs. Vance squeezed her hand. That's why the scholarship bears your name too, Maya. Your story will continue to inspire others, to show them that circumstances are temporary, but determination, education, and kindness can change lives forever. Mrs. Henderson added, and the library will always be here, ready to welcome the next person who needs a place to dream, to learn, to become. That evening, Maya visited her mother's grave for the first time since receiving Mrs. Vance's letter. She placed her journal beside the headstone and spoke softly about everything that had happened. Her new role, her upcoming classes, the scholarship fund that would help others like her. "You were right, Mom," she whispered. "Knowledge, really, is the greatest wealth, but it's not just about what we learn. It's about what we share, how we help others find their own path to success. Your dream of becoming a nurse may have been cut short, but your love for learning lives on in every student I teach, in every life touched by this program." As she walked back to her apartment, no longer temporary housing, but her home for the upcoming school year, Maya thought about the journey ahead. College classes would begin soon, bringing new challenges and opportunities. The mentorship program would continue to grow, reaching more students who needed support and guidance. But most importantly, she had found her purpose, not just in education, but in being part of that endless circle of kindness that had lifted her from despair to hope, from survival to success. Her story had become more than just a personal triumph. It was now a beacon of possibility for others facing similar struggles. In her apartment, Maya opened her journal one last time that day. On a fresh page she wrote, "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning. Every act of kindness creates ripples that reach farther than we can imagine. Mrs. Vance's letter didn't just change my life. It started a chain reaction of hope that will continue long after today. To anyone reading this in the future, your circumstances don't define your worth. Your struggles don't limit your potential. And your kindness has the power to transform not just one life, but many. Keep learning, keep growing, keep helping others. Rise. That's how we create lasting change. One person, one dream, one act of kindness at a time.